Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hi, welcome to today's webinar, Career in Impact Investing. My name is Sayuri Sharper, and I am the president of MIT Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group. Let me start by briefly introducing everybody to what SEAG does. So we are organized under MIT Alumni Association, and our mission is to build a community around MIT affiliates and friends that promotes and supports social entrepreneurship and impact investing to build a better world. What we like to do is collaborate with other like-minded organizations, and we are very grateful that a lot of them have been willing to be our speaker in our webinar series. This year, we are conducting two sets of webinars. One is investor track, and the other is entrepreneur track. And for each, we have speakers who are either practitioners in impact investing or social entrepreneurs in various stages of their journeys, provide direct experience and information to everybody that logs on. Just a reminder, since one is coming up is on February 14th, we're doing a getting started in direct investments. So if you haven't signed up yet, please look for that and sign up and join us then. In terms of collaboration, I am very happy that today's webinar is co-sponsored with MI3. And let me pass it on to Amrita Sankar, who is co-president of MI3, and she will tell you more about what they do.
Thank you so much, Sayuri. Hi, everyone. My name is Amrita Sankar. I'm one of the co-presidents for what we call the MIT Impact Investing Initiative, or MI3, along with Sean Sutherland. And we have a leadership team of 12 folks for the premier student organization at MIT's campus focused on impact investing. And you know, Sayuri, I'm really excited to say that for the past 5 years, we have really scaled as an organization from being a solely student interest group to a pre-professional group of students that are very passionate about impact investing and looking for careers within the space. So excited for this webinar. I know it's going to fulfill a lot of student appetite, and delighted to have the speakers that we have today to talk about careers within impact investing.
Can you introduce our speakers or go over some of the logistics of how the webinar is going to run today?
Sure. So I would be happy to address some of the logistics, and then would love to introduce some of the speakers that we have present today. So for audience members that are on the webinar, a few house tips that I would advise. If you're on the webinar, on the bottom of your screen, you should see 3 dots that say more. If you click on that, there should be an option that says chat. That will be a chat function throughout the webinar, so that if you have questions, you can ask them throughout the presentation. And then we will set aside the last 20 minutes to formally go over questions. Sorry, go ahead, Sayuri.
Yeah, Amrita, actually they have Q&A buttons. So please
terrific.
use that rather than the chat button. And then this way, all the speakers can see the questions.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I apologize. So please use the Q&A button if you would like to ask a question. And as you ask questions, I will address them either directly or direct them to the panelists that it pertains to. Additional questions that we don't get covered through the presentation, we can also then post on the SEAG LinkedIn group, which we will address all of the questions to the best of our ability. Sayuri, is there anything else that I'm missing?
I think that's it.
Okay, perfect. Well, very excited to introduce the 3 speakers that we have today. And then for each of them, I'll address a few questions that they can cover during their allotted time. But the three speakers we have, so first I'd like to introduce Gerhard Pries. He is the Managing Director and CEO of Sarona Asset Management. We're also joined by Kate Luce, who's the Investment Director for Capria, and then Elisabeth Chasia, who's a Portfolio Manager for NCE Social Capital. And Sayuri, would it be helpful to read their bios, or will we provide that after the presentation?
I think that we'll let them introduce themselves, and then the bio will be available after the presentation.
Wonderful. And so then for each of our speakers present today, if you could just address how you got started within the impact investing space, provide a brief description of your firm, and then highlight what your thoughts are about a career in impact investing, as well as what employers are looking for in new hires, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Gerhard?
Perfect. Thank you, Sayuri. Thank you, Amrita. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm going to see if I can get this screen working better. There we go. I'm sitting in a hotel room looking out over across the sunshine here in the desert just east of Los Angeles. I'm from Toronto, so it's great to be somewhere where it's sunny and warm at this week. Hey, yes, it is great to be here to talk about impact investing, which has been my career. Someone once said that if you're 20 and not a socialist, you have no heart. If you're 40 and not a capitalist, you have no brains. That's been ascribed to Winston Churchill, I think Roosevelt, and a few other people. So I'm not sure where that comes from, but that's kind of a common path that people tend to take. For me, it was perhaps the opposite. So how did I get started in impact investing? I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and while there began reading books by Mother Teresa and Jim Wallace, and had a distinct desire to explore the other side. So started with the corporate, with mid-market advisory, and then sought out to Mother Teresa in India to see what the other side of the world was like. And so it was in my mid-30s before I finally discovered that one could really make markets work for the poor. Until then, my life had been about making markets work better for mid-market business across Canada. I also public-private collaboration became a thing. Even 10 years ago, I really did not want to talk to the public sector. It was a pain, but that has changed. This week is the 75th anniversary of the Yalta Agreement, and that was at the end of the World War, at the end of World War II. And since then, since World War II, for the last 75 years, the private sector, those of us who are in the private sector, have been seen as the fount of all poverty. If it wasn't for the private sector, there would be no poverty in the world. And so for me, I refused to work with the public sector because of that view, the view that the private sector was all evil. But that has changed. That changed dramatically in the last 10 years. I recall in 2015 in Addis, that's now 5 years ago. The United Nations met in Addis Ababa to talk about the upcoming Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and how would the governments around the world finance all of that. And in that meeting in Addis Ababa, I recall the World Economic Forum had called together a number of us, quite a number of us from the private sector, in a hotel, and across the street the United Nations was meeting, and a few of us were called into United Nations Assembly to bring a private sector view. And it was at that meeting where I heard one government after the other stand up to declare that they now recognize that they needed the private sector as a partner in order to solve development challenges around the world. And in the hotel room across the street where the business community was meeting, CEO after CEO stood up to declare that we now recognize that our commitment, our obligation, our responsibility is to more than just shareholder value. It's to people and the earth. And that's where this concept of, or at least this openness for prosperity for all was born. Prosperity for all today, prosperity for future generations. And so this concept of prosperity for all is something that has come to be more accepted. It has come to imbue the economic thinking of today, the era of short-sightedness, the era of getting in on a deal, the era of flipping companies. That era is pretty much over. We still see it in places, but it's pretty much over. When I went to school, I'm now in my late 50s, when I went to school, that was not a common theme. When I went to school, my colleagues in the business school were about pure bottom line orientation. Today, I'm thrilled to see that there's the business schools are full of people who see a more holistic view of the economy, who want to put heart and head together, think about the earth and future generations. And I share that with you because when you think of a career in impact investing, when you think of a career in investing, it almost by definition today requires thinking that's beyond just bottom line. It's those of us in the impact investment field or impact investment sphere have wanted to imbue all of the economy, all investment activity with a values lens. It's not just impact investing as a separate industry, as a separate activity, as 5% of a portfolio. Impact investing is everything we do. I was pleased to see that last week JP Morgan announced that they were launching a private DFI, a private development finance institution. Development finance institutions have been the domain of the public sector until now. And we're now seeing what we've all been working towards, and that is to seek to imbue all investment decisions, all business activity in the economies today with a strong impact lens, social, environmental. Sarona, who is Sarona? Very quickly, we seek to be a leading impact investor for emerging markets. We invest in private companies in emerging markets seeking top quartile returns at the same time as strong social and environmental impact. We don't do public equities or public debt. We do private. We're only invested in emerging markets and private equity and private debt. And we see our impact at three levels. At the company level, where you can measure number of clean megawatts, gender equality, gender balance, women's empowerment, HR programs, et cetera, et cetera. You can measure a lot at the company level. More impactful, less measurable, is can we be influential at the private equity industry level, private debt industry level? Can we influence thinking and through that thinking build healthy new economies? But like all private equity, private debt firms, we're small. And so when we talk about careers in private equity, it's really tough. There are not many jobs. There's not much turnover. There's private equity firms other than KKR, et cetera, are necessarily small. Private equity firms normally have 15, 25 people. That's the total firm. A career in impact investing, if I may say, is not much different than non-impact, except that you add values. So the skills are the same. The heart may be different. The skills for the private equity skills, the private debt skills, and surely on the public side, the hedge fund side, I would imagine it'd be the same. But in our world, private equity, private debt, the skills you need in impact investing are the same as the skills you need in any other non-impact in investing firm. We as employers, when we're looking for employees, for talent, we're looking just like any other firm would. We're looking for smart people, experienced people, people with a track record of success, people with usable skills. I had one young fellow apply for a job recently coming out of the School of International Development. School of International Development is good. It proves that you're a nice guy. but it doesn't necessarily give you usable skills in the impact investment sphere or in the investment sphere period. So what we look for, what we look for is the same skills that you would look for in the non-impact space, that is financial skills, operating, running a business, track record in creating something and bringing it to success. And then on top of that, of course, is a whole values envelope that needs to be wrapped up in. But you can't have just the values envelope without those usable, employable skills right in the center of it. So we need smart, experienced people with track record of success, people who take a long-term view and seek to create or want to create healthy new economies with positive progressive values. And Amrita, Sayuri, maybe I'll just leave it at that for the moment, and maybe leave it for questions later.
Thank you, Gerhard. So let me turn it over to Kate, who is from Capria Ventures. Kate?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. And thanks to the work of Gerhard and others that came before me working in this space, I was actually able to start my career, as Gerhard said, making markets work for the poor. So I have a little bit of a different story, but it's really thanks to the long journey of impact investing and social good that has really allowed me to always work at the intersection of money and meaning. I learned about for-profit social enterprise in college and actually even before, and I was really determined to make that the focus of my work. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do that so far. So when I think about the space, the social enterprise space, and for me, that's the for-profit social enterprise, where you're really tackling for-profit solutions to poverty and to creating opportunity around the world. I see it as a triangle, really having 3 points. The first that I was thinking about when I was starting my career is there's the operator, and that's either the entrepreneur or an employee at a company. The second point is the consultant, so you're supporting or you're advising entrepreneurs. And then the third is the investment piece. So investing in entrepreneurs and really determining which entrepreneurs and businesses will get funded and be successful, but you're also supporting and advising them. So when I was getting started, I was thinking about those 3 roles and trying to figure out what is the right role for me. And I really believe that experience in each of the 3 points makes you stronger in the other. So I actually started out my career co-founding a company, a social enterprise out of college. And it was really a great adventure and a huge learning curve. And as an early 20-something, I tried to build this company across Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. And through that journey, I worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, and I really learned that I was passionate about democratizing access to services and finance globally. And after 5 years of that startup, though, as you tend to do, you'll get a little bit burnt out. And I saw I was really hitting a wall in my growth. And I wanted to gain another perspective on that triangle. So I actually started transitioning and doing some work in the more consulting and advisory space. But I learned from that I really wanted to be more hands-on. I loved building things. And I wanted to continue thinking about that final point of the triangle and that investing piece. For me, I thought that would be a good mix of everything. I think you get to bring, you're working closely with entrepreneurs, you get to do some advising and consulting, but given that you also have capital and you're investing, there's a little bit more weight behind what you're doing and a little bit more influence. And that was really interesting to me. And so I wanted to explore that final piece. However, I found it difficult to get into the investing space, given my more non-traditional background for some of the reasons that Gerhard said. I didn't have formal finance training. I hadn't worked at a bank or another investment firm. I hadn't even worked at like one of the big consulting firms. I'd always focused and kept that social enterprise consulting at kind of the core of my work. So I decided to go to business school and use that time to gain some of that credibility and most importantly, the network. I think the network in impact investing is the most important thing and to get a job. I've applied to hundreds of different places probably over my years. And it's really until you build those connections and networks in the space, because it's highly networked, it's still pretty small, I'd say. And people really go on a lot of trust. And there's so many people trying to look to get into the space now, and wanting to work in impact investing because they think it can provide them the salary and some of the benefits they're looking for, along as kind of making them feel good about themselves. And so from business school, I used that opportunity to explore and do some internships in impact investing, and start working and just really networking in this space and getting to know people and developing the skills that Gerhard mentioned that are really important. I agree, it's you have to have those pure finance and analytical skills in order to be a good investor in this space. You're looking for companies just like any other investor, and you want to make sure that you're able to do the diligence and support those companies and really ultimately deliver strong, both in my case, financial and impact returns to LPs and to my own investors. So that kind of makes it sound like a logical journey that I went through, but really it was a lot of doubts and failures along the way. But that brings me to Capria and where I'm working today. So I joined Capria about 3 years ago, and Capria leads the largest network of collaborating fund managers in emerging markets. So that means we partner and we invest in fund managers. And right now those funds are investing across 23 different countries. And by the end of 2020, those funds will have about $1 billion in AUM collectively. So although Capria is small and we're investing in these small managers, all these funds are investing in what we call the missing middle finance opportunity. And the IFC has said that this is a $3 trillion opportunity. And so for us, that means that we're investing in a little bit earlier stage entrepreneurs, and the funds are also then investing there. And looking to invest maybe like $500,000 to $5 million. So these are the post-angel seed kind of, but not large enough companies for private equity in these different emerging markets. So this has allowed me to really get very hands-on with the fund managers that we work with, and then also the 200 plus kind of underlying investments in portfolio companies that these funds are investing in across the world. And so for Capria, we're just wrapping up fundraising for our second fund, and we're backed by family offices, institutional investors, and foundations that are then investors in Capria and allow us to do this work. So when I think about a career in impact investing and kind of see a little bit from my own journey, that I don't think there's an obvious path. I really think what I say is that you have to manufacture your own impact work. There's not a lot that's well-defined or is going to be handed to you. And I think you really have to treat it as an entrepreneurial journey, which for me is great. I loved being an entrepreneur. I loved being an operator, kind of an owner of my own business. And I love that the investing space still has a lot of those same qualities. What I would suggest is I'd say to develop a hypothesis about what you want to do and figure out ways to test it. So that's what I did during business school, and I did different internships. I did different volunteered. I just reached out to impact investing funds that I was interested in. I said, can I do some market research for you? Can I do a diligence on a project? Can I sit in on anything? Can I offer support? And I was surprised. Some people actually took me up on that, and I tried to make it really valuable for them and be able to deliver something that would support, and I could learn and develop my own skill set and start to say I've had some experience with transactions. So I'd say the three things that I really say. So first, the hypothesis. The second is to surround yourself with the people you trust. Really form your own personal board of directors. I think, again, that cannot express the importance of networking in impact investing and how important that is for getting a job and really moving up in the space as well. And then the third I'd say is to figure out what your non-negotiables are. It is a really hard space to get into if you're not already in impact investing. So you may not get everything you want in the first job. And I was willing to work for a company that didn't fit everything I maybe wanted, but I tried to figure out what are the things that were really most important for me. So for example, I narrowed it down to three. One for me was the goal, or why am I motivated to do this? And that was to look for market rate financial returns and scalable impact. So there's the whole spectrum of capital and impact in impact investing, from more nonprofit and grants, which people put under the impact investing bucket, all the way to the other end, which is targeting market rate financial returns. So I wanted to figure out what I was motivated by and what I believed in terms of what could work. So that was the first. The second for me was figuring out the stage of what type of investments I wanted to make. And I explored some kind of later stage, like lower middle market private equity, very early stage angel investing. And I learned that really my skill set and experience as an entrepreneur and having that more non-traditional background really lent me to working earlier stage. So I wanted to work in kind of the seed, Series A, investments where you're really hands-on a lot of times with the entrepreneur founder of the company. And then the third for me was emerging markets. So my company before school and all of my consulting work had really been internationally and focused there. And I thought I had another skill set to bring to the table in terms of working between the US and these emerging markets and having a good sense of the ecosystems there as well. However, I really not a fan of what people call airplane investing. So I knew that unless I wanted to, move back to Nairobi and be based there, I didn't feel myself comfortable investing directly in East Africa, for example. So what Capria does, which really resonated well with me, is that Capria is a kind of more fund-to-fund model. We're finding and investing in local fund managers around the world. So we've seen, 600 plus of these funds, people that are starting local funds in Brazil and India and Kenya. And so what we do is we're training them, and we're almost like a Y Combinator for fund managers around the world. And then we're investing in those funds who then have the local networks they're from and based where they're investing, which is really important to me. So that last piece, and Capria kind of fit that for me. It fit all three of my non-negotiables, which is why I ended up working here. And then I think the last piece is what employers look for in new hires. I'd say that skills are really important, and I totally agree that it's the same skill set, analytical and financial skill set for impact and non-impact investing. I would say in my kind of more recent journey of getting hired in impact investing or looking for careers in impact investing, earlier level analyst hires, I found that very kind of traditional banking consulting backgrounds are really highly valued. And I think that's because people want to make sure that you're analytical, you have that proven skill set, because you're doing a lot of kind of more transactional diligence, financial modeling types of responsibilities, which I think was a little bit tough because my skill set actually as an entrepreneur and as an operator wasn't as valued at the earlier stage of when you're kind of looking for an analyst or an associate. However, I find that later on at the higher levels, if you're trying to come in more as like a director or a principal or a partner of a firm, the skill set's actually pretty different that's needed. I think there it's really important, one of your number one goals is fundraising. So networks and connections is really important, as well as your ability to support and add value to your portfolio, and ultimately find exits for your portfolio companies. So I'd say kind of depending on your background and skill set, figuring out what type of role in impact investing you wanna go for. If you want to be on the fundraising side, the investing side, maybe a portfolio management side. A lot of impact investing firms also maybe have a specialized impact person. So I'd say really figuring out what are your skill sets and how can you match that with the stage of a firm and kind of qualities of an experience that you're looking for.
Thank you very much, Kate. And I just want to remind everybody that as you think of questions, you can just hit the Q&A button and put it in. And after all the speakers are done, we will go to those Q&A. And with this, let me introduce Elisabeth, who will give another perspective. Elisabeth?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sayuri, and thanks everyone for listening to me and having me join the webinar. So my name is Elisabeth Chasia, and I am a portfolio manager at MCE Social Capital. So I focus on our debt investments that are in Anglophone, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia. Just to begin on how I got into impact investing, I think similar to Kate, I had sort of a non-traditional path to this career. So I actually began my career in the completely other side, which was in the nonprofit world, working in arts and education. My role there was basically around corporate partnerships. So I managed the relationship between corporations and the nonprofit that I worked for. And essentially corporations would give a gift to the nonprofit, and then they, as a result, would get thousands or millions of eyeballs on their sponsorship, and that they were basically using their marketing budget to increase their exposure by accessing the people that patron that nonprofit. And so I got a little bit sort of frustrated between the divide between sort of doing good and making money, I think as others on the webinar have expressed, And I knew that I wanted to get into impact investing, but I didn't really know what the sector was and how to get in. But I did realize that I needed some business experience, which up until that point, I had sort of a public policy degree, had been doing, fundraising and nonprofit. And so I wasn't really a direct line to impact investing from a career standpoint. So I did go to business school, where I was able to get a lot of training around corporate finance and general, valuation. And I, during that time, was also trying to narrow in which part of impact investing I wanted to focus on. So I knew that I wanted to be in the investing side, and I want to sort of talk a little bit later about the other parts you can also do, but I knew that I wanted to be on the investing side, but there's so many different firms that are doing all sorts of impact investing across a number of sectors and a number of geographies. So I really used my business school experience to take internship with asset managers and private equity firms and et cetera, so that I could figure out like what area of impact investing that I wanted to do. And so I really settled down, which is unsurprising, on sub-Saharan Africa, which there's a lot of impact investing funding that goes into sub-Saharan Africa. And so I realized that that's where I wanted to be. I'm also a dual Kenyan and American citizen, so it's really very unsurprising that that's where I ended up leading myself. So I had a very personal commitment to, making markets work for the poor and sort of where I'm ethnically from. And so I ended up actually continuing to get more training through management consulting, which I think really tests your quantitative background as well. I ended up working for a firm that does a lot of sort of impact investing consulting projects for large DFIs. So that got a good training on, that got sort of additional training for me on sort of the finance and the way impact investors think about that intersection of finance and impact. When I sort of left management consulting, I actually ended up working for a startup in Nairobi. So my thinking in that point was, if I'm going to make investments in sub-Saharan Africa, I need to know what it's like to build a business in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think that's similar to what Kate was talking about as well. It is really, really difficult to build a social enterprise in an emerging market. And I think it's really important to understand sort of the non-traditional challenges that social enterprises face, from access to energy, access to talent, regulatory issues, corruption, currency depreciation. These are all things that maybe a social enterprise in the United States does not have to go through. And so I thought it was a very good experience to work for that startup and try to build that business, which was focused on reaching people who are, it was a for-profit business working, reaching people who live on $2 a day. In a very vast distributed model. So sort of a lot of last mile delivery issues. And so that was a very good experience. And from there, I transitioned over to MC Social Capital. And that's where I continue to focus on my area of expertise, which is sub-Saharan Africa. To give a description of MC Social Capital. So MC Social Capital is headquartered in San Francisco, where I'm sitting right now, and MCE provides debt financing directly into SMEs in the Global South and also microfinance institutions. So on the SME side, we focus on debt investing to SMEs that are in the agriculture value chain, clean energy, water, and sanitation, and all for-profit social enterprises. And then on the microfinance side, we're just focused on large sort of MFIs that have been working in those areas, providing loans, that are usually between about $50 and $50,000 to small businesses. For MCE, our ticket sizes are between 100,000 and 3.5 million. So we are targeting sort of that missing middle that right now is not receiving enough access to finance within emerging markets. And from a geographic standpoint, while I focus on our sub-Saharan Africa portfolio and our Southeast Asia portfolio, we actually are making investments across 38 different countries within Latin America, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe. So MCE is focused across the entire Global South. And just to give a little overview of MCE and the way our structure is. I think it's sort of a really interesting model. MCE is not a traditional fund. So we are an impact investing firm that deploys about $60 million a year. However, we have three main key stakeholders. We have investors, and we have our borrowers, and we have guarantors. So MCE borrows what we lend. So we borrow from development finance institutions, from socially responsible banks, and from individuals. And we take that money and we then lend it out and make investments directly into those small and growing businesses and those microfinance institutions in the global South. And so there's a little bit of a spread between what we borrow at and what we lend at, and that funds our operations. In addition to that, because we're trying to provide capital in high risk environments, we have a group of guarantors, which are high net worth individuals who guarantee our investments back to the people we lend to. So in the event that you could end up in a country kind of has a civil war or a massive currency depreciation, MCE does have a second level that we can sort of lean on to help make us back whole again and to continue investing. And then the last stakeholder is obviously our borrowers. And as I mentioned, we're looking for companies that are providing financing or within sectors that are underserved within those countries in the global South. So to think about a little bit about the impact investing sector. So I like to think about the impact investing sector. I used to say it was a toddler. Now I think maybe it's a kindergartner. So the sector is building up around us right now, and we're all contributing to constructing it in the way that we want it to be. And so as a result, as things are refining from a career standpoint, I do sort of believe that, you know, the kind of talent that was attractive in impact investing 5 years ago could be different than the talent that is going in right now. I would agree with what others have been saying in that it does require a quantitative and technical and analytical background. I mean, the other half of the word impact investing is indeed investing. And so you do have to actually make some money off of the investments that you make. And that is done by being able to really analyze the capacity of a firm in our particular situation, which is debt financing, and now analyzing the capacity of a firm to actually pay you back. So I do think the investing portion is really important. For MCE, we are also looking for people who have on-the-ground experience in emerging markets. So because we don't do any domestic investments, because we don't do any investments in Europe, we want to know that you've sort of lived and been able to work within, you know, Kenya or Cambodia or Peru or somewhere that we currently make investments, that you are bringing that network with you, that you understand how things work in that kind of environment. In addition to that, I would also like to mention that for those of you who may feel that investing itself in the quantitative and analytical part is maybe not something that you feel strongly about, there are parts of the impact investing sector that need other types of skills. And so one of that is impact measurement, which is coming in right now. Is super important. And how do you know you're actually making a positive sort of impact in the world, and how do you measure that? And that's a really growing sector. Also, there's another part of impact investing, which is around sort of building building the space itself. And there's a lot of firms like the Global Impact Investing Network and other organizations that are working on sort of convening and building the sector itself. So there's a way to be in impact investing if you don't like to do investing itself. So I just wanted to highlight that if that's something that may be of interest to other people as well. So I think just sort of as a conclusion, I think that there's many different non-traditional and traditional paths to get into impact investing. It's a really small space. So I would say be patient and keep at it. And, you know, as you can eventually get there with a lot of sort of hard work and narrowing a focus on what you're interested in doing. I think that's it for me. I will let Sayuri take over.
Thank you, Elisabeth. I think all three of you are really special people, and hopefully there are additional special people on this webinar live that can join you guys. So let me start with first question. And again, everybody else, please feel free to put your question in Q&A and we'll get to them. So the first question, which is pretty close to what Elisabeth was talking about, is how do you measure impact for companies? Is there a common impact factor? How about I'll start with Elisabeth and see if Gerhard and Kate has more to add. Elisabeth?
Sure. So that's a very good question, and we're actually building our impact and measurement ourselves. I know that that there is a impact measurement framework that exists in the space. I believe it's called GEARS. However, I will say that MCE is building its own impact measurement on our own. So when we look at, we have two main initiatives, as I mentioned. We invest in SMEs, or what we call small and growing businesses, and we invest in microfinance institutions. And for microfinance institutions, microfinance is a space that's been around a long time, and the impact measurement in MFIs is actually more cut and dry. There's been a lot of development of what to measure in terms of, there's basically how, what kind of income levels are the people that are being served, what percentage of them are women, how many of them might live in rural communities, what is their income growth as a result of taking that loan now. So the MFI space, I think, is quite, it's more streamlined on impact. On the small and growing business space, especially within agriculture, clean energy, water, and sanitation, this is tougher. And so we're trying to sort of understand who is actually served within the value chain of the business. So that could be, who are the businesses buying directly from in terms of smallholder farmers, how many people are being employed by the business in terms of, how many jobs are they creating, and what are the general impact in the communities in which these companies operate? What would be the choices? What would be available if those companies did not exist? And so what have they brought to the community in general? But we are still developing our framework. So this is something that we work at every day on how to understand how far our impact goes. So I think I'll pause there in terms of my response.
So let me turn it over. Oh, Kate, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say, I think there is not a single industry standard right now, although I will just say, if people are interested, the Impact Management Project is trying to build a global consensus on how to measure and manage impact, and they're integrating some of the systems like Iris Plus and SROI and Lean Data. So they'd be an interesting one to look into, and they're trying to get buy-in and collaboration from a lot of the stakeholders in the space in order to build kind of this general global consensus around impact and how to measure and define and manage it.
Gerhard, I think what you guys are doing is more kind of ecosystem building, so maybe you have a different perspective.
Right. Yeah, and not, and I think impact measurement is really important. 15, 20 years ago, when we were doing this, our investors were essentially all high net worth individuals, high net worth families, and for them it was anecdotal. You'll know it when you see it, but they didn't ask about metrics and impact measurement per se. That's come to the fore, and I think it's really critically important. But let me say one thing: being a change agent is way more important than measuring. Measurement is important, but we need to focus on being a change agent, making changes in companies, making changes in industries. Changing the way the world thinks will change the way the world acts. The metrics and measurement are really important, and I don't want to diminish that. I will say, when we created Microvest, for example, I remember this was 2002, I think, when we first launched Microvest, and which was investing in microfinance. And these were early days for all of that. And we had some NGOs come to us and say, you've got to measure how much of the capital is being invested in the poorest of the poor. And we said, wait, it's tough enough telling investors we're going to take your capital to Africa, Asia, Latin America, and they're all afraid of that. And then we tell them we're going to put it in the hands of micro entrepreneurs, and then they're really afraid. So the biggest challenge for us was simply getting investors to invest their capital into emerging markets and into the SME or microfinance sector. Then driving it to the poorest of the poor. Number one was maybe a bridge too far, and secondly, we were afraid that if you measure things like that, you're going to do you're going to act in the wrong way. And indeed, that turned out to be. Then we refused to measure how much capital was invested in the poorest poor, and that proved to be a good decision, because we saw when capital was driven to the poorest of the poor in places like India, there was a big crisis of over-indebtedness by people who weren't actually using it for consumption and weren't able to convert borrowed money to productive capital, and so they could not repay. And so all that simply to say is two things. One is focus on being a change agent. Number two, measurement is important, but be careful what you measure so you don't end up driving the wrong thing.
Thank you. The next question is, what opportunities are available for someone in FTE yet wants to volunteer remotely for some social enterprise in developing countries and emerging markets? How about Kate? Would you like to take this?
I guess I'm not exactly sure. So is this looking for someone who who needs work opportunity in the US, or I'm not quite sure exactly what this person's asking.
Okay, I guess I don't know what FTE means either. Elisabeth, do you have an answer for this?
Hi, I'm actually not sure what, I'm not sure what, I mean, FTE, I understand is full-time employment, but I'm not sure that sort of is sort of different than the second part of that question. So,
okay, I guess then the question is, how do you volunteer for social enterprises in developing countries?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that relates to impact investing. So why don't I take that? And by the way, for the questions that may be not answered here, we can take it on the LinkedIn group. So we have more opportunity to ask for clarification further. So I would encourage anybody that wants further discussion to join our LinkedIn group, and we can carry that on there. Okay, so the next question is, we have a startup based in Nairobi empowering small business. We are looking at starting a fundraising in March as our pilot. How do we get involved? How do we contact the impact investor? Okay, again, this is not really the questions for I think today's speakers. So let me also ask you to join us in the LinkedIn group, and then we can ask there. The next question is, are there low time commitment, 5 to 20 hours a week, ways for us to get our feet wet in impact investing space? Kate, do you want to take that?
Sure. So I would say there are, and I would also say that they're likely not well-defined. It's not something, you can just apply to out there. I would say that this is where it really takes someone being very entrepreneurial, like really manufacturing your own role, as I say. And I think for me, when I did this, or at least me, if there are things out there, that's great if someone else knows of some. But for impact investing specifically, for me, I made a list of the impact investing firms that I was interested in. And then I started trying to figure out who I knew there or who I knew could introduce me to people there, until I had a warm lead and a warm contact. And then I reached out and I tried to understand, well, first I tried to understand the specific firms' kind of current challenges or where they are in the stage of their life cycle, what they might be needing support on or what they're working on. So I'd say also a lot of impact investing firms are probably trying to do a ton with a few resources. So, but also as someone now for Capria, we hire interns and fellows for full-time, but like 6-month placements. And it's hard to make an internship valuable for both the intern and the company. So I was very conscious of that when I was reaching out to places and tried to propose very kind of defined deliverable projects that I could do for them, such as let's do like a market study on maybe they're looking to move into are they looking at fintech in sub-Saharan Africa or South Africa or something? Can I do some type of research or a project or report? And really for me, that was a way to kind of get my foot in the door. And if I was able to deliver some type of very clear value to the organization or to the impact investing firm, that was valuable for them and it was valuable for me. And then also opened up the door. And then oftentimes they would invite me to start sitting in on the weekly investment team meetings or potentially even some investment committee calls I could be an observer on. But I really think you have to make your own opportunity happen.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is, do you have advice on how someone early in their career who has worked in the social impact sector and may not be ready to invest in business school could go about acquiring the analytical and financial skills required for impact investing? Elisabeth, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah, so I think that's actually where I was as well. When I came into business school, a lot of the accounting and finance skills were new to me. So I think that if you feel that, I would take as many accounting and finance classes that you can to give you that foundation while in business school. And then if you still need further technical skills, which again is what happened to me, coming out of business school, I wanted even more. I would, seek the big recruiting that happens at some of the top business schools in terms of investment banking, asset management, management consulting, those kinds of sectors. Even if you do, boutique, you don't have to go to the major banks if you don't want to, but if you can kind of focus into that sort of career path, you're going to get the technical and quantitative skills after working there for a few years.
Okay, I think the question that was asked is, if you are not ready to go to business school or invest in going to business school, is there any way to acquire the skill set that is necessary for impact investing?
I see what you're saying. So if you don't go to business school, what would be your, if you don't want to actually pursue business school, what would be your other option? That is, then I would say, depending on your, then I would recommend maybe doing more traditional accounting would be really helpful. So if there's a way that maybe within your organization or trying to learn kind of what it's like to work within a finance department of a social enterprise, ideally for profit, but even a nonprofit social enterprise, something that's going to give you those foundational skills. Because accounting at the end of the day is the foundation for all investing, largely.
Okay, the next question is also for Kate and Elisabeth. What did you do during business school to make a career shift to impact investing? Elisabeth, you want to answer this and then we'll pass it over to Kate?
Sure. So in addition to internships, there were programs within business school where they were focused on impact investing. So we had like a microfinance I went to Columbia, so it was a Microlumbia, which was like a microfinance program. There was a private equity group that had a part of it that focused on Africa. So I was in that group. So I did a lot of those sort of pre-professional groups to get an idea of what kind of other companies were in the sector, conferences that were being held, I attended or worked with on the conference itself. So a lot of that pre-professional programs that exist in business school, I basically got myself a part of and was super involved in those kinds of things outside of internships. I guess I'll pass it to Kate.
Yeah, so I'd expand on that. I'd say a couple different areas. So one is being in business school and having, that title of student, a lot of times that can open doors just for informational interviews, just to reach out to people trying to learn about what they're doing in their industry. And so I took advantage of that. And then I also got involved in clubs or organizations or conferences at school that also kind of gave me a reason to be reaching out to some of these impact investing leaders. So for example, I helped lead, I went to HBS. So HBS is Harvard Social Enterprise Conference, which we were looking for speakers. So I got to reach out to people, learn about them, and kind of get my name in front of them so I didn't seem like a stranger if I then wanted to circle back later on. I also, so I ran the Impact Investing Club at HBS. And I found that a lot of times the impact investing communities at certain schools might be pretty small, especially the people that are actively looking, and like I was determined to work in impact investing after school, and I didn't want to take a kind of circuitous path of going to management consulting or something else to get there. And I found the number of people that were really determined to work in the space right after school was pretty small at my school specifically. So then I actually reached out, and the Boston community is great. So I actually collaborated with with MIT and HKS and other schools to bring together the groups and people interested in impact investing to grow my peer network, and then also tap into their networks. And they were all doing internships in the space, and I'd ask for introductions. So a lot of networking. And then two other things. One, I also organized some career treks. So in Boston, we did an impact investing career track actually with the local Boston schools. And then we went to a number of different organizations. And by organizing that, those organizations started to know me. And then the last piece is I also, and I know you guys have this as well, as MINT. So the MBA Impact Investing Network and Training run by Bridges Ventures and Wharton. So I took part in MINT. And then I did an internship with Bridges, well, now Bridges Fund Management. And I also, for them, worked on doing some career tracks and using that as a platform to reach out to and build my network with other impact investors. And I think that's really important to have those kind of warm introductions and to just kind of, stand out, have a reason to get that first call and stand out from the pack when tons of people are kind of reaching out and applying to these internships or to full-time roles, and to really show that, a lot of people I would find would be interested in impact investing, but not willing to kind of stick it out to the end. And I didn't end up getting my full-time role in impact investing till like maybe April or something of my second year of school. And everyone else kind of was like, got a little skittish, and they were really risk averse. And so they were kind of interested in it, but then they, ended up taking other offers earlier on and went to management consulting or something that was much more defined. So I'd say that if you're really interested in it, like, stick to it and you will be able to find something. It takes a lot of work, and you have to be a little bit kind of okay with ambiguity and a little bit flexible and have a little bit of a higher risk tolerance.
Thank you, Kate. I think this question is going to go to Gerhard. Do you think it would be possible to have a world where the only kind of investment is impact investment? Gerhard?
Yeah, that's what we've all hoped for. So yes, I think that is a possibility. The world has changed so much already in this regard from where it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And part of it, I think, is the speed of and transparency of communication. So you'll recall a few years ago, the Rana Plaza in Bangladesh collapsed, killing a lot of workers. It was not 24 hours until the companies, the CEOs of the companies that were producing clothes there were on the front pages of the New York Times. That causes business leaders to be aware of and afraid of doing the wrong thing. And so there are many reasons where, some people say it's just a pendulum swing, it's a fad, impact investing is a fad, it's going this way. I disagree. I think this is here to stay, and I'm thrilled for it. And if we all work together incrementally, I think we can move the whole world of investing, the whole business community, to a world of doing business through a lens of positive values, positive impact. We're on that path. We're a good ways along. I think we can keep it going, and the future, yeah. So this may be a bit Pollyanna, but I think the future for our grandchildren, notwithstanding the climate crisis that is upon us, will be better than what it looked like a few years ago.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. Before I conclude our session, let me put up a slide on how you can stay engaged with SEAG. Okay, so there are a couple ways to connect with us. One, if you're a MIT alum or an affiliate, you can go to Infinite Connection and choose to join the Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group website. The other way is through LinkedIn, and I would encourage everybody to join us there, even if you're an MIT alum, because there's more capability for us to have discussions, and you can post questions to the officers or any additional question for the speakers. And we would love to get suggestions from you about future programming. And you can get active and spread the word that there's a community here that is building on how we can support and encourage social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And again, thank you for attending, and hope to see you in the next webinar.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.